Welcome to the Life Podcast, where life stands for Live Inspired Fully Every Day. Join our host, world-class speaker, executive coach, and leadership strategist, Anissa Rashad. Each week, as she sits down for an intimate conversation with business executives, influencers, and artists who are at the top of their game to reveal the strategies they use to excel in their respective fields and their personal lives by unpacking their spirit. Each episode is guaranteed to help you lift a load, tackle a problem, gain a new perspective, while having a laugh in the process. Now here's your host, Anissa Rashad. Hi, I'm Anissa Rashad. Welcome to today's episode of the Life Live Inspired Fully Everyday podcast. We are honored to have as our guest today, Dr. Jeffrey Woods. Now, Dr. Woods comes to us with a wonderful background. He is the principal consultant at Full Circle Consulting. He's a speaker, a corporate trainer, an ultra athlete, the founder of Fathers for Futures, a husband, a father, and I am very pleased to call him a friend. Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a blessing to be here.
Thank you for being here. And so I want to jump right in. And so Jeff has something, I call him Jeff because he's a personal friend. You guys can call him Dr. Woods, but I'll call him Jeff for purposes of this episode. So one of the things that I know about Jeff is that Jeff, he says was, if you look at him, I still say is, an ultra athlete. And so tell us what it's like as a college student. And so one thing I know about Jeff is he has a long career with track and field and running. So what does it take to become a champ? That's my first question for you. Tell me what you were doing before you ran that race in college that enabled you to still hold the record 20 years later and now be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Great question. Well, if I can start with being a champion in any type of sport or an athlete, the first thing that you really need is to really have and understand your goals and your desires. Right? Once you have the goals and your desires, then you need to always monitor your behaviors. You know, are your behaviors getting you closer to your goal, or are they moving you further away?
So let me stop you right there. So as a college athlete, what was I use the word intention often. So what was your intention? Did you have a clear intention? Were you actively working toward that goal? So talk to me about that.
Yes, so actively working towards that goal to the point where you visualized it. Mm-hmm. I visualized it every day I went into my room. I had someone made a picture of a shoe, and on my wall it was a picture of a track shoe that had Barcelona on it, which is my ultimate goal, was to make the 92 Olympics, which was in Barcelona. So every day I woke up, I saw this big track shoe on my wall. Right, that was my goal. That was my desire ever since I was like in 7th grade, was to make the 92 Olympic team. So it just became ingrained in my DNA that I was going to make the 92 Olympic team.
Wow. I'm going to have my nephew speak with you. He is an amazing swimmer who's on track for the Olympics, and I just think it would be awesome for him to have a conversation, a one-on-one conversation with you. And so you said it starts with having the desire. You put it up there, and then you just work toward that.
You got to work towards it. You know, your behaviors have to support that goal. Your behaviors, your circle of friends, it all has to be in sync with your goal. And if it's not, it's moving you further away. Okay.
And so I know that a lot of your work is built around this 5-pillar framework. So the 5 pillars, if I can recall, are integrity.
Correct.
I'm not going to say them in the order that you teach them in. Courage.
Correct.
Humility.
Yeah.
I know the 5th one was the add-on was discipline.
That's it.
Compassion.
Got it.
Was that it?
Integrity, humility, compassion, courage, and discipline.
All right, Anissa. Very good. Okay.
Good job.
Okay, so your 5-pillar framework. And so we're not going to talk about all 5 of the pillars here
Yes.
because we will be here for 2 hours. What I'd like for you to do, if you could only teach, if right now today, there was a mandate that was issued that said from now until the end of time, you could only teach about one of those pillars. Which one would you choose and why?
Great question. Well, I have to teach about integrity, which is the first pillar. Mm-hmm. And the term that's been copyrighted is 5-pillar performance for living and leading.
5-pillar performance for living and leading.
Correct. So the one, if I had to do one for the rest of my life, it would have to be integrity. Mm-hmm. Why integrity? Because integrity is the foundation. It's the foundation of all relationships. And if I don't have the trust of my followers, mm-hmm. If there's no trust that exists between myself and leaders, myself and athletes, teammates, then we don't have a relationship. So the important thing to remember is that without trust, it's impossible to have relationships. Mm-hmm. So integrity is the foundation of all relationships. So as you work on that foundation of one, being honest with who you are, who your talents are, mm-hmm. right? You have to be honest, and doing that deep self-analysis day in and day out will help you to, one, be comfortable of who you are as a person and as a leader. It'll also help you to develop those relationships with others, because mm-hmm. one of the things that you want to do is be authentic, mm-hmm. and people can see when you're being fake. And if you're being fake, then you can't have a relationship. Uh-huh. So integrity would be the foundation. Now, I would teach integrity from now until I'm in the grave.
And so I'm curious, because you teach this work all the time, there are leaders who have shown up a particular way inside of their workspace, but they're listening to you today and they're like, I want to show up having more integrity, maybe more than what I've demonstrated in the past. What would you say would be a good starting place, if you would, for a person who wants to, maybe they've been living a life with integrity but may not have had a flashlight shining on it, but they really want to illuminate it and have it come to the forefront and maybe have that be their personal brand to be known for integrity? What would they do? What would be like a starting point for them?
It's to continually demonstrate integrity. And if you can remember this, walk the walk. You may have heard this before. Walk the walk and
talk the talk.
Talk the talk, but your walk talks louder than your talk.
All right, say it again.
All right, walk the walk, talk the talk, but your walk talks louder than your talk.
You guys got that? That's your tweetable from Dr. Jeff Robinson. from Dr. Jeff Woods. Walk the walk, talk the talk, but your walk talks louder than your talk.
Awesome.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that.
You can facilitate on walk the walk, and now you got the pillar. You're good to go.
We do. We need to partner to do some work together at some point in the future. And so I know that the folks who know me personally know that something I love that my family does every year. So we travel a lot. We have 3 little people, and our 3 little people are like big people, actually. And so every summer they go to the most amazing camps and they do all of these things. But every member of the Rashad family knows that by the time we have our annual camping trip, we all have to be back in California. And sometimes we literally are getting home the day before the camping trip in order to make it happen. And so the camping trip that I'm referring to is, we call it Family Fun Weekend. And we have close to 100 African American families who get together and go camping every summer. We normally go to different campsites, and we just create this really wonderful village and community for our children. And we do all kinds of fun things while we're there. And so what a lot of people may not know is that the genesis of that camping trip started with like a vision from you with your Fathers for Futures.
Correct.
So tell us what your vision, why you would start something, and what it looked like when you had the first gathering outing. And even at that time, did you have a vision, like could you conceptualize that it would be this big? Because it's pretty big. Because when you start talking about 100 families, it's a lot of people. When everybody has kids, and some people bring their parents, so it's multi-generational.
Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful to be a part of. And so we do hiking and yoga and tug of wars and conversations around the campfire.
Beautiful.
And it's morning meditation. It is, I'm telling you, it's one of the highlights of my year every year. And so
Awesome.
A couple of questions. What was your vision when you were started? And did you envision that it would grow to what it is today?
Great question. And I do want to give kudos to Aquil Safir, who is just my brother.
Yes.
We're not in the same frat, unfortunately, but, I still love him. But where did the vision come from real quick? So I was driving along the 126. If you're here in California, you know where the 126 is. I was heading to Oxnard. And I had the vision was, how do I impact the life of my child, Clayton and Lacey? And as a man, I struggled with that legacy. So on the 126, the whole concept of Fathers for Future was birthed. Because I remember I called two people. I called my mother, and she was like, sounds like a great idea. And then I called Senator Green, who you'll get the opportunity to speak with, who's the president of Full Circle. Those are the two people that I called. And the vision was to create an organization where we create memories, lasting memories. I had done so much research on the cycle of absence with fatherhood and how much it really affects kids. So the vision for me was, how can I be intentional with the organization? And one of the first events that we had a breakfast. We had breakfast with dads. And I would say probably 20 dads showed up, but there was probably 100 kids.
Wow.
It was absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
And we had it here in Santa Clarita. Beautiful event. Now, as I was planning future events, one of the things that came to mind was maybe doing a camping event. So I had this idea of doing a camping event at Lake Castaic. And the first camping event, we had about 10 dads show up with kids, and it was just a beautiful thing. And what I remember about the first time that we did that was just sitting back and overlooking the harbor out there and watching dads put tents up with their kids. Right, and the whole tagline was investing time today, creating memories for tomorrow.
Oh, love that.
So that was the tagline for Fathers for Futures, and it was just a beautiful when you have a dad come up to you and say, I've never put up a tent before, and it was kind of like, well, let me show you how to put that tent up. So I would do it, and then Will Humphreys, my brother-in-law, was there. So he put up some tents.
Will's tent is often right beside our tent.
Yeah. So it's absolutely beautiful. At the end of the day, it's about ending the cycle of father absence in our children, and I'm proud and humbled to know that it continues, and it's been continuing. And I lived in Indianapolis, but I would always watch and see when the father event was the family fun weekend. And it's just a blessing to see what you guys have done to kind of continue to do that.
When I tell you the spirit that you started with, what the Safirs do and the amount of labor of love they put into this is just remarkable. When I tell you that vision that you talk about of watching fathers put up the tents, every year there are dads who this is their first time putting up a tent. And I see my husband, my son, all the other men going around, oh man, come on. And they just start helping them. And they don't make them feel bad about it.
That's exactly right.
Right? And when it's a new family, we're sharing food. Get this for next year. And it's just a beautiful energy that's created. I know one year I had just come back off the road, got in. My husband went out ahead and put our tent up. And when I arrived to the campsite with the kids and the food, I looked at our tent and I felt like he had carried my books to class. Remember high school? And the guy carries your books to class and you fill up. I was like, look at him. He's taking care of us.
Awesome,
He's providing our shelter out here in the woods. It was absolutely. And people are like, Anissa, you go camping? Is it glamping? No, it is pitching a tent.
That's it.
Camping. And it is a beautiful, wonderful experience.
Yeah, and it's the experience that now the kids that have gone through this, 20 years from now, if they have kids, they're always going to remember this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have fathers that play active roles in the lives of their children, guess what? That passes down to kids, and they're going to do similar things to stay actively involved in the lives of their children.
Absolutely. And so now we're at the part of the show that I love, and this is where we unpack your spirit. Right? And so we're going to start with the S in spirit.
Right.
And so I'm just curious, Jeff, what's your secret sauce? What is your secret sauce to success?
Another great question. The secret sauce, and it's my lens, which is I see everything through 5-pillar performance for living and leading. And the 5 pillars are integrity, humility, compassion, courage, and discipline. So everything that I do, if it has to do with work, I'm always looking through this lens of 5 pillars. My personal life, I've been married to Raquel Woods for 18 years. We have 2 beautiful children. Everything that I do through them is 5 pillars. So what does that really mean? The secret sauce is if you examine integrity. The integrity definition is like really remaining whole. It's whole. And so I understand the importance of, particularly when you're married, to have a foundation for your relationship that's built upon trust. Mm-hmm. So very important. You have to have trust in your relationships, regardless if it's your wife, if it's your girlfriend, the relationship that you have between yourself and your children, they have to trust you. So that's the first pillar. Humility, it's making the transition from selfishness to selflessness, right? When I think more about my wife and how do I make her life easier, even if it's as simple as my issue is I keep the cabinets open. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's easy. Maybe it's just I just close the cabinets. It makes her life easier. Mm-hmm. Maybe I just wash a dish. So making the transition from selfishness, because we're all selfish, to selflessness.
So I'll say Jeff and I were just at the same New Year's Eve party recently, and I have takeaways from everything. This is why I created a Life podcast, so you guys can get takeaways. And so when I came home the next day, my husband and I were lying in the bed, and I said, "So, baby, what were your takeaways from the party last night?" You know, one of my takeaways, I think my greatest takeaway was when Jeff said this piece about selflessness and how you actively work all of the time to make your wife's life easier. Yeah. And I was like, wow, if we just adopted that lens to say, and so I've been doing that, like, it's so funny, just little things. So just little things. It sounds crazy, but we are big hummus eaters here.
Okay.
And I have my hummus that I love. And then we have the one that we're both kind of neutral on. And so I just started buying him like the one that he likes, like the super spicy, that I'm not going to eat one scoop out of that, right?
But he likes it.
But he likes it. And it's just these little things that are just more considerate, more kind, more selfless.
That's it.
And I got that from you.
Oh, well, hey, I'm doing a namaste pose for you.
Namaste.
That's awesome. But you have to be intentional with it. And my secret sauce is being really intentional with the pillars, particularly integrity and the humility piece. Compassion, it's really about, we're quick to serve up judgment on everything. And when we can become selfless and refrain from judging, but offer compassion, particularly like in the business world, right? In the business world, someone calls out, "I'm sick." Sometimes we're quick to judge that piece that I'm sick and make assumptions that they just don't want to come to work. But your people see that, and if you're having the conversations at the water cabinet or whatever, people see that, and they see you not as compassionate as you need to be. That affects that affects employee commitment and performance. So. In the business world, showing compassion towards others is extremely, extremely important. But you have to be intentional with it.
Okay. What principles, I guess you talked about the principles in terms of the 5 pillars. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add about that? What principles have served you well as a leader?
Well, I'd say one of the pillars is the courage pillar.
Okay.
And sometimes as leaders, we're fearful of being vulnerable. Because depending on what company you work for, vulnerability could be a sign of weakness. And if you're a director or a vice president, And, you know, you don't want to be seen as weak, but it can be construed as weakness. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we consciously just suppress the feeling. But the courage is really, the piece around courage is having the courage to be vulnerable and say, you know what, I don't know it all. Mm-hmm. You know, you know this process better than me. Why don't you come around and help me do it? But for a lot of leaders, it's very difficult for them to do that.
And so having that courage to step in and just show that vulnerability. I love it.
That's it.
Now, we all get tired. And I often think to myself, who motivates the motivator? Like, you know, most of the phone calls that come in, my job is to listen, right? And so when is it that, like, where do you go to get your motivation? Where do you go to get your inspiration? So this is that I for inspiration.
Got it. So there's a book written by a gentleman, O.G. Mandino, and it's called The Greatest Salesman. I don't know if you've read it before.
I have. Most books that come across there, I've read. That book, I've heard about it, but I haven't read it.
It's an older book.
Those are the type I really love, like the ones that were written in 1932.
Oh yeah,
those are the ones I love.
It's an older book, and it's a great book to have with some tea, kind of like what we're doing now. But when I get tired, one of the things that I always want to stay true to, integrity, right? Be true to yourself, right? That's the first pillar, is really sticking to my purpose. And that book, O.G. Mandino, will really help you to kind of assess your purpose and really believe in your calling and have faith that, guess what, keep doing the things that you're doing because you do have a purpose. So that kind of re-energizes me.
I love it. And so this is just a little bit of insight into our world. So Jeff has just done a speaking engagement all day for the National Baseball League. And so it's a Sunday evening. And so after that, he's come over to record the podcast. So his voice, I know, is tired and weary. So I'm pumping him up with tea and, you know, all this stuff to get him so that we can just extract these little jewels from him. So I appreciate him taking the time out of his super busy schedule to come be with us and to share with us. And so you talked a little bit about that shoe in Barcelona. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, what other rituals or routines do you practice? Maybe a particular morning routine do you practice to help you perform at such a high level?
One of the things about being in a leadership role and then having the opportunity to kind of pour into folks is having a clear mind yourself. So I practice getting up early in the morning and working out and exercising. Because I know if I don't take care of my temple, I'm unable to pour into anybody else, particularly my family and some of the other people that may be following me in regards to followers. But getting up, taking care of yourself, having a healthy breakfast, working out, that's a daily ritual. Mm-hmm. But also spending time, at least 5 hours a week, to kind of pour back in yourself. That's whether reading, growing. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, we don't know it all. So kind of exercising the body and the mind as well as the spirit.
Mm-hmm. And so you had talked to me that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about journaling offline.
Yes.
So one of the things, and I'll just share it with you, and all the information will be there because people would ask me about various different aspects of it in terms of my routine. And so I put it all in a nice little workbook that I can just email you. And it's called The Morning Jam, JAMMM. And it simply stands for, again, you don't have to write it down. I'm going to give you all the goodness. You should see him. He's a great student. Not only is he a teacher, he's a great student. He's writing it down. And so the J stands for journaling. Mm-hmm. The A is doing your affirmations, so affirming. The first M is for mental rehearsal, which is in your vernacular visualization, visualizing. Mm-hmm. The next M is for meditation, and the last M is for movement. And so I always say movement versus exercise or workout because people have in their mind that it has to look a particular way. Getting up, driving to the gym, and doing that for an hour. Oh, I don't have time to do that. And so I say move your body. That can look like yoga. That can look like doing jumping jacks for 5 minutes, a quick little workout in your hotel room. But some type of movement for your body every day. And so that morning jam, I would offer that not only to you, but the folks who are listening, if you are trying to get into a morning routine, the morning jam is the easiest easiest morning routine ever, and it's one that you can do no matter what.
Yeah.
Because it's not dependent on how much time you have.
Got it. Love it. Thank you for sharing that.
You are more than welcome. And so we looked at your spirit, where you go for inspiration, your rituals. Now I want to look at, you do a lot. So I'm curious about what you're doing to reinvent yourself, right? What are you doing to reinvent yourself? Tell me.
Yeah, so another great question. You just hit them out of the park with this.
Yeah.
No analogies to the MLB training that I was doing today with Hunter Green.
See how we're in sync?
Right. So what am I doing? I think for the listeners out there, exposure leads to experiences. And the experiences will help you define your purpose. So one of the things that I do in regards to innovation is really is look for experiences, right? Because you just never know what you can find in the experience. Because it'll give you it may support your purpose, but I know if I don't have the courage to experience new things, for example, like a podcast, right? And so I'm learning a lot about this already. But you have to be willing and humble enough to say to yourself, you don't know it all. There's always room to grow. And Zig Ziglar talks about, from a business perspective, like when you want to motivate somebody. There's a couple of different ways to motivate. You can motivate them with fear, but eventually people are going to get callous to that. You can motivate them with incentives. I'm going to give you this incentive, and that's temporary. But the way you really motivate people is when you help them to grow. So one of the challenges that I have for myself is, how do I make myself grow? And it's the experiences. Well, whether I'm listening to a different podcast, if it's a spiritual podcast, or it's I started listening to this guru podcast like last week, which is really different, and which just caused me to kind of shift my focus on a couple things.
Who was it?
His name was it's Sanjay Guru.
Sanjay Guru?
I believe that's his name.
Our listeners are into all types of things, so that might be something they want to check out.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty neat. But in regards to innovation, always keep yourself up to experience different things.
So when's the last time you did something for the first time?
Probably 2 weeks ago.
Okay, look at you.
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago. And I had this, because in 2018, probably up to 2018, I've received a lot of information. And I read something, I don't know if it was I don't know if I heard it in a podcast, but 2019, I had this feeling that it's time to give back and give out. You've received a lot over the years, kind of give it out. So I had this idea, let me try writing a blog post. And I did it. I watched a gentleman named The Professor. I don't know if you're familiar with The Professor. His name's Grayson. But he's a basketball player, played for N1. That doesn't sound familiar?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Okay. Excellent point guard. But listening and watching him, I said, I need to write a piece on that and show where I pulled out the pillars out of his talk, out of his TED Talk. He did a TED Talk.
Oh, I got to check him out.
And but yeah, I mean, just listening to his story. So I said, well, let me give it a shot. And so I wrote this podcast, or I wrote this blog, and a lot of vulnerability there.
Absolutely.
And so I embraced that and sent it out. So.
And that's how you become great, right? Just keep doing new things, and then a year or two from now you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm churning out these blog posts, and it'll be just like that.
Right.
So the next question I have for you, give me 3 tools that you use to help you stay on top of your game.
So of course the first tool, if you've been listening, the first tool that I use is 5 pillars.
Right.
For living
Absolutely.
and leading. You have to abide by integrity.
Is there anywhere they can go and get like an infographic or something that has the 5 pillars, or can we make that available for guests in the show notes where they can click a link and get it?
I'll send it to you, and then you can make it available. So
Perfect.
then you can go do some research on the 5 pillars. But yeah, so the first tool is the pillars. It's really easily accessible. I use the 5 pillars for children that are in first grade. all the way to business leaders and presidents.
Okay.
It's easily accessible. You think about the integrity. What does it mean to have integrity?
At every level.
At every level. The humility. Life is, when you think about life, it's not just about us. And I just commend you on what you're doing.
Thank you. So what are the other tools you use? 2 more tools.
So I love what makes my life easier at home. I'm forgetful about birthdays. And, I've made a promise to myself that I'm going to be better. My brother recently passed away, and he was really good at birthdays. So I promised my nieces that I'm gonna be good at birthdays and Christmases. So Amazon Prime really helps me out. I don't forget sending flowers, gifts, and it's real easy.
And they're happy to help you.
And they're happy to help me. And but it makes me feel good to be able to give back and give on time. And put some thought into it. But also YouTube. I love.
So hold on, before you go to YouTube, with Amazon Prime, are you using Amazon Smile? And so the Amazon Smile is you can pick your charities that you love, that you want to donate to, and then they'll give money toward those.
Okay.
So whenever you're making your purchase and your regular shopping, just like you would do, like anytime I open up my Amazon Prime, my Amazon Smile pops up. And it's like,
I'm going to have to pay attention next time I do that. Because maybe unconsciously I'm clicking out of that. But that is a great idea, too.
Then you might want to get Fathers for Futures to be one of the organizations in Prime that people
nice.
could use as well.
Yeah, possibly. Thank you.
Of course.
Give me the thumbs up. That's
what
great.
I do. Is what I do.
So, Amazon Prime, I ain't going to lie, that really is making my life easier in regards to remembering birthdays.
So you utilize the pillars as a tool. You utilize Amazon Prime as a tool. And then what's that third tool?
And then YouTube. I love getting on YouTube and looking at various TED Talks. And most recently I did that on, Senta gave me an assignment around this concept of cultural humility. And you may have heard the term in education, cultural competence. There's like this big push for
cultural competence.
Educators to be culturally competent, and which is different from cultural humility. And I had the opportunity to go to a seminar with Dr. Melanie Turvalon and Dr. Garcia, who are the pioneers of cultural humility. And so what I did was, when I got that assignment, went right to YouTube to kind of see what kind of talks were out there around cultural humility. So if there's something that you want to learn, YouTube, you can become really educated
using YouTube.
Yeah.
But you can't learn how to swim on YouTube. That's for anybody who watches the television show Blackish. That it was an episode where Dre was trying to learn how to swim via YouTube.
Yeah.
Now you got to get in the water to learn how to swim.
In the water.
You have to get in the water to learn.
And you say water like I say water.
Absolutely. So this is my last question for you today. I've certainly enjoyed our time together. What's the one thing that you recommend to our Life podcast listeners to help them live inspired fully every day?
I would say remain flexible. And most recently, I had a friend that went through a major issue. And I started doing some research. I'm not sure how I stumbled across it. I'm reading this book called Ichigai. Senta Green put me onto this book, Ichigai. And the whole concept of Ichigai is kind of like when you get into your moment and it becomes flow. There's like a certain flow about things. And so as I was doing research about that, I came across a picture of bamboo. Believe it or not, bamboo. And I started researching bamboo and how it's flexible, it's hollow, right? And the whole concept, the blessing about bamboo is that it is hollow. There's room to be filled. So it doesn't break, it bends, right? So when you have adversity, be like bamboo, bend with it. The humility about bamboo is that it's empty, right? And we need to be empty. Because if the cup's full already, I can't receive anymore. So today, as we're wrapping up, we're sitting here enjoying a cup of some wonderful tea, and I did some research again on this concept called Ichigo Ichie, which is a Japanese concept. It's kind of like a tea ceremony, and you need to embrace each moment. So right now, the whole concept behind Ichigo Ichie is to embrace this moment, and it'll never be duplicated. It'll never be duplicated.
And with that, I would love to thank you for taking the time to join us today on the Life Podcast, to share your nuggets, to share your wisdom, to share a cup of tea.
Thank you. It's been great.
Oh, we really appreciate having you. And I am Anissa Rashad. This is the Life Live Inspired Fully Everyday podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.
As always, we thank you for taking the time to listen to the Life Live Inspired Fully Everyday podcast. If you enjoyed the show, by all means, subscribe. While you're at it, do your friends, colleagues, and family a favor and share. There are thousands of podcasts available in iTunes, so help others to make the same choice you did by leaving a review. We love to hear from you, so leave us a question and maybe we'll select your question to answer on our next episode. The show notes that list all of the books, tweetables, and companies we referenced are all available at lifebyAnissa.com. Until next week, I am Anissa Rashad, executive coach and leadership strategist, challenging you to live inspired fully every day.